They are as American as any single one of us. And despite the president's attempts to slander them, to speak ill about who they are and what they represent, these folks are among the very best that America has to offer. They are people who, oftentimes from a very young age, as children, arrived in this country, have only known the United States as their home, some who only speak the English language, all who have felt the fear of living in limbo for many years, who felt the joy in 2012 of being able to come out of the shadows when President Obama put DACA in effect, and now again feel the fear of deportation looming. We are here today to speak the truth about who these people are. And I want to say thank you to the DACA recipients that are here today. It was amazing to be out on the Supreme Court steps and see people from every walk of life, not just the dreamers and their family members, or the immigration advocates who have been doing such great work for many years, but also out in strong force, members of the American business community who came out to speak the truth about how valuable our dreamers are to this country. And earlier this year, the House of Representatives passed a DREAM Act, a Dream and TPS Act, H.R. 6. The fact is, all of us are anxious to see what the Supreme Court says, but in the House of Representatives and under Speaker Pelosi, we're also not waiting for the Supreme Court. We have taken action. We have passed a bill that would put dreamers on a path to citizenship where they belong as Americans with all of us. Unfortunately, right now, it's buried in the desk of Mitch McConnell, and we're asking the Senate Majority Leader to take action, to do right by these folks, and to do what's best for the country. With that, it's my honor to introduce somebody that I had an opportunity to serve with for several years and was a member of Congress for several years, but has now gone on to another wonderful role in public service as the Attorney General of California. That's my friend, Xavier Becerra.
Mr. Chairman, I am not only pleased but proud to stand with you, the Hispanic Caucus, with the Senate Democratic leadership and the House Democratic leadership to speak about Americans and American values. When California initiated its lawsuit along with many individual dreamers and joined by some 20 other states and the District of Columbia, it was to defend the people that are standing with us here today. It was to defend the values that have made it possible for those dreamers to feel American and to know they are American. What we heard today in court was that you got to do it the right way. There's the right way to do things and there's a wrong way to do things. The dreamers that are standing here did exactly what they were asked to do by the federal government. They came out of the shadows. They went through background checks. They proved that they have a basis to be in this country, and now they've proven themselves as doctors, as lawyers, as teachers, as successful college students, as people who in America we would perceive to be our friends, our family, and perhaps our first responder. And so they did it the right way. The folks that did it the wrong way were the Trump administration. They tried to eliminate the DACA program illegally, and now they're being tested in court. Every court so far that has tested this question has found on behalf of the dreamers. We believe the Supreme Court will as well, because the dreamers did it the right way, the Obama administration did it the right way, Congress is trying to do it permanently the right way. If only the Senate Republicans would join, and if we do it the right way, these folks who are American, that we call dreamers, will have a chance to shine and prove their in full worth. We will continue this fight until the very end, whether it's through Congress or through the courts. But we understand that when you do it the right way, you should not be punished. Now I believe Senator Durbin of the Senate Democratic leadership will speak next. Let me hand the mic over to Whip Durbin.
Thank you to Xavier Becerra, and you have carried on in California with real leadership on this issue since you left the U.S. House. Thank you for coming back home today to be with us on this historic day. Look behind me. The president says you are looking at very tough and hardened criminals. Take a good look at these criminals, would you? That's what the president tweeted this morning about these young men and women. He said that they were no longer young and angels. Well, none of us are that young anymore, I can tell you that. And I don't know who among us would claim to be an angel. But this much we know about these men and women, young men and women standing behind me. You are looking at some of the most determined and courageous people in the United States of America. They have lived their entire lives under the shadow of an immigration status which has raised a question every time someone knocked on the door. They have been counseled and warned by their parents not to say the wrong thing, not to do the wrong thing, or their entire family could pay the price. That is the price that they have paid to be here today. And at one moment in history under President Obama, we said, we're going to give you a chance. You've got to come forward, go through a criminal background check, pay a substantial fee, and we'll give you your chance to stay in the United States on a temporary basis for 2 years, renewable every 2 years. We won't deport you, and we'll let you take a job. And what did they do? 790,000 of them trusted this government and stepped forward and signed up. Many of their parents warned them, don't put your name on that list with the government. It could come back to hurt our families. But they had the courage and the belief that what their government told them was the truth. They came forward and signed up. 90% of them are working today. Over half of them are in school today. They are teachers and engineers and members of our military. They're our dream of the future. Well, this battle for the dreamers in my life, my political life, began 19 years ago when I introduced the DREAM Act. 19 years ago. It's been a long time to make that trip over to the Supreme Court this morning. But there's hardly been a chapter written in the civil rights history of the United States that hasn't taken a long time. When you're fighting for justice, you've got to be determined and patient. The president tells us when it comes to immigrants, it's fear, it's hate. When I look behind me at these DACA recipients, I don't see that at all. I see courage and I see hope. And I see the future of the United States of America. Today we heard the arguments in the Supreme Court. It's my prayer that they'll come down our way for the good of those who stand behind me and so many others. But it's also my prayer that it comes down our way for the good of the United States of America. What's at stake here is not just their fate. What's at stake there is our values as Americans. Immigrants from all over the world who came to this country and said, we can make this a better place. And thank goodness our parents and grandparents believed that and led us to this moment. Now we have to move forward. We know what we face. Bob Menendez, you know what our problem is in the Senate. We've got a good bill, an excellent bill, passed by the U.S. House of Representatives. It's sitting on the calendar in the United States Senate. Senator Menendez and I will be making unanimous consent requests this week to bring this measure to the floor. I can tell you it's an uphill battle, but we want the other party to go on record. When the president said, let's legislate an issue, let's legislate an agreement, we're going to call him at his word. We're going to ask Senator McConnell to bring this matter to the floor of the Senate this week. I want to thank Congresswoman Roybal Allard for being here today. She and I have been working together on this for some time as her chair of the Hispanic Caucus and as a real leader on this issue. It is my honor to turn over the microphone to you, Lucille.
Thank you so much, Senator. And you know, the Senator is correct. The young people that are back here, this is who we're fighting for. They are not the people that the president is trying to portray as murderers and rapists. And yet, 2 years ago, the Trump administration cruelly tried to rip protections away from nearly 800,000 dreamers by abruptly terminating the DACA program. The president's chilling message to immigrant communities across America left dreamers in a state of uncertainty and fear of being taken away from their family and removed from the only country they call as home. The fact is, and we all know that, we've heard this and we've seen it, that the dreamers are American in every way except on paper. They grew up pledging allegiance to our flag and to our country. They are our neighbors, our children's teachers, our nurses, our scientists, small business owners, friends, and colleagues. Dreamers serve in our armed forces in defense of our country. They pay taxes and they enhance our society with their talents and the richness of their culture. This country is their home. Today, the highest court in our land heard their case against Trump's unlawful termination of DACA and its xenophobic administration. It is my hope that the Supreme Court recognizes the personal injustice of Trump's administration's actions and rules in favor of DACA recipients. It is also my hope that the court will not ignore the fact that the stories and hopes and dreams of DACA recipients are those of all dreamers in our nation. Hopefully, the court will rule to protect DACA recipients, but as has been said, Congress must go further. We must expand protections to all dreamers who deserve an opportunity to become citizens of the only country they know as home. In June of this year, dreamers were given new hope when the House passed my and Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez and Yvette Clarke's bill, H.R. 6, the Dream and Promise Act of 2019, which protects dreamers and TPS and DED recipients as well. Well, it is our hope the Supreme Court will not be complicit in the Trump administration's anti-immigrant agenda. We must continue to be motivated and active in calling on Mitch McConnell and the Senate to pass the Dream and Promise Act, because only then will our nation's dreamers be able to live without fear and continue to contribute to the country they love, because home is here. And now it is my pleasure to turn over the microphone to Senator Menendez, who's also been an incredible supporter for many, many years of our dreamers.
Thank you, Congresswoman. As I was sitting in the Supreme Court today listening to the arguments, it reminded me of a meeting that the Congressional Hispanic Caucus had with then President Obama. And at that meeting, I prepared a memorandum, a legal memorandum on behalf of the caucus to present to President Obama to say, you have the power to actually create what we now know as DACA. And after a lot of work with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus members and other colleagues, we ultimately got President Obama to agree and create the DACA program. I listened to the arguments in the court today, and in my mind, the court should clearly decide in favor of the dreamers. Why? Is this case reviewable? Well, if you can get 700,000 to 1 million people to rely upon what the government says, come forward, give us all of your information, go through a criminal background check, give us the information of your families. If that reliance is not one that is to be sustained or reviewable, then God knows what is reviewable in our country. So from my perspective, yes, it has a standard for being reviewed by the court. And then the question is it fair to have a process in which all of those who submitted their lives, their information, their most sacred position in this life comes forward and you snuff it out without any detailed process to understand what it means and what that reliance meant and the consequences that flow not just for dreamers, but for all of those who support the dreamers, those who have hired them, those universities that have given them admission, those, in fact, in which they're ultimately creating a better future for all Americans. And then finally, is it legal? My God, you know, it's clear to me that President Obama or anyone else had the discretion to decide how they're going to use the resources of the federal government in a way to ensure that these young people
who, through no fault of their own, brought to this country by their parents. Ultimately, the only flag they've ever pledged allegiance to is that of the United States. The only national anthem they know is the Star-Spangled Banner. The only country they've ever called home or known as home is America. Home is here in every respect. The only difference for them, many of them have served in the uniform of the United States. Imagine saying to those who have worn the uniform and risked their life on behalf of the United States that you are not ultimately able to continue to defend the nation. You are not worthy of ultimately be given a temporary status. It's unconscionable, and in my mind, also illegal. So at the end of the day, I hope the court ultimately decides for us, but I agree with my colleague, Senator Durbin, who has been on this issue for nearly 2 decades. When we passed as the Gang of Eight comprehensive immigration and reform in the Senate with over 67 votes, only to die, and then the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, we had the best dreamer package that ever was envisioned. Would have given all of these young people their pathway to a clear future and on behalf of the United States. Unfortunately, never got a vote. I sat in the White House when President Trump says, I want to treat these people, young people, with love. Well, love like that we don't need. Because at the end of the day, when you ended the program, not the court, when you ended the program, and when you started on a pathway that puts all of these young people at risk, then that's not love. And when you ask us to take their parents and choose their parents and their loved ones over them, I haven't met a dreamer yet who's told me to do that. So it's just fundamentally wrong what the administration is doing. Congress has the right and the power to challenge the executive branch and say, we have a different view. Let's pass the legislation. I'm going to join Senator Durbin. Let's see who stands for the dream and who wants to snuff it out. I know we have virtually every Democrat who will stand with us in support of the dream, and hopefully some enlightened Republicans, and then let the president decide. Does he want to snuff out the dream, or does he really love the dreamers? With that, I'm pleased to introduce the Assistant Speaker, Ben Ray Lujan. Is he here?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. The President said he was going to treat our brothers and sisters, the dreamers, with heart. The cruelness that we continue to see coming from this administration, the hateful rhetoric and policies coming from Stephen Miller, they're not American. It lacks the moral compass of what America was founded on, this dream, this delicate idea that we could come from all over the world and contribute to this special place, building opportunity, looking after our families and our loved ones, and opening up doors for future generations behind us. That's what dreamers represent. They represent the highest of the American ideals that we cherish every day. So why is it that Stephen Miller and President Trump continue with this hateful rant? It's not heart, Mr. President. It's hatefulness. ¿Por qué no tienes corazón? Why don't you have a heart? But there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity now for the Supreme Court to do the right thing, to uphold what's happened with the lower courts. The courts have all done the right thing. They've stood by the American people. By the way, what the president is up to this morning with those ugly tweets, he's trying to diminish public support for these amazing men and women behind me. Moms and dads, brothers and sisters, friends and neighbors, co-workers. Let's do the right thing. Let's pray for the Supreme Court. Let's pray for the country. Let's pray for these dreamers. But what we need for the American people to do is something that we learned from Congressman John Lewis. Make some noise. Speak up. Show up. Stand up. If you don't know a dreamer, just open your eyes. Get to know them. Tell their story. And I want to close with this. I had the honor of meeting Sam today, a dreamer from New Mexico, a recent graduate from New Mexico State University who talked about how he can't go see his abuelita, his grandma, his mom, who live just miles away from where he lives in the United States of America. If you support family values across the country, support the Dreamers. Open your eyes and get to know why we're in this together. With that, I want to turn this over to one of my colleagues, Congresswoman Sanchez from California.
Thank you, Ben Ray, and I want to give a big thank you to everybody who has come out here to stand up against this attack on Dreamers and on DACA recipients. Not all of us here today are Dreamers, but I bet that each person in this room knows or has met a person whose life literally depends on this decision. Dreamers aren't strangers. They're our teachers, our classmates, entrepreneurs, members of the military, and our neighbors. And don't you think that they deserve to live without fear? They don't deserve to be stuck in limbo just because of the president's petty politics. The only place that they call home is the United States of America. That shouldn't be controversial. It's just a fact. But you know what? This administration doesn't like facts, and they don't seem to like rules or laws or following the rules either. But the Supreme Court has the opportunity to enforce the rules and to follow the law. The Supreme Court has the ability to defend our democracy and our system of checks and balances. The only fact that Trump knows is that he wins when he pits some Americans against others. But we won't let that divide us. We won't turn our backs on our neighbors. We cannot let that cynicism win. A house divided up against itself cannot stand. Now, DACA admittedly has never been enough to protect our Dreamers in the long run. It's a temporary solution, but right now, it's all that these outstanding young men and women have. These young people are American in every single way except for on paper. They're just as American as those relatives who arrived on the Mayflower. They are just as American as you and I, and they deserve this simple protection. You know, President Trump is very fond about talking about a merit-based immigration system, but I can't think of a group that is more meritorious than the young men and women that stand behind me. Dreamers have succeeded in this country despite every obstacle that has been put in their path. They contribute to our communities every single day, despite the repeated attacks by people who don't know or want to know them, and by our president. All eyes are on the Supreme Court today in the hopes that they will uphold the rule of law. They have a chance to protect our Dreamers and to send a message that America is not a monarchy. No matter what happens, please know that we are in your corner. We are in this fight. We will continue to fight to protect DACA and to the Dreamers whose only home is here. I want to thank again everybody who's come out in support of Dreamers and of building this country and making it great. And with that, I'd like to introduce a colleague from the Senate, from the great state of Nevada, Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. First of all, let me just thank all of my colleagues, but most importantly, the Dreamers that are standing behind us. They're not merely a backdrop. This is, and what you see here are the faces of the people and the families that live across this country. In Nevada, there are 12,000, almost 12,000 DACA recipients. And what we heard today is the Supreme Court actually taking oral argument on the fate of 700,000 Dreamers across this country. But I'm here to tell you, and I think we all are, that it shouldn't come down to the Supreme Court making this determination, and I hope they do the right thing. But it comes down to all of us in this country not whether we're in Congress, but in the administration or in our individual lives, in our communities, all of us doing right by these kids that you see behind us, their families, and everyone across the country who's a dreamer. I can't tell you how many stories that are out there of the real lives and the impact. I know it's easy when we get back here to Washington, we get in this bubble, we make decisions that have a determination on so many people across this country. But those decisions that we make have real life impacts on the stories and the real lives of the people and the dreamers that you see before you. These aren't just faces. These aren't just names. These are individuals living in our community who just want an opportunity to succeed. They are hardworking. They are working 2 jobs. They are getting an education. They are law-abiding. They are helping their families. And we are telling them, you do all of that? Oh, and by the way, we're going to deport you. That is outrageous. That is not what our country is built on. That's not who we are as Americans. But most importantly, that's not what we should be doing to the best and brightest in the future for our country. It is time for us to do the right thing. And here's my offer. This administration, whether it's the president or the people around him, want to play politics with the lives of dreamers and their families. We've seen it time and time again. But here's my one offer. Mr. President, if you truly love dreamers and you want to do right by them, their families, and this country, then I offer to you to come with me and sit down with some dreamers and talk with them. Learn who they are, listen to their stories, and you will understand, like the rest of us, that they are an integral part of who we are as this country, as Americans, as the United States, and what we have done year after year is open our doors to the best and brightest, because what you have behind us are the best and brightest. So I make that offer. Do the right thing. We will all continue to fight for our dreamers, their families, and across this country. And I thank you all for being here in the fight, and I look forward to continuing the fight with all of you. Thank you.
All right, I hope I got my instructions right on the order here. We have, of course, our 2 wonderful leaders of our 2 chambers, and it's my honor now to introduce a gentleman from New York who has been fighting for dreamers for many years now and DACA recipients for many years now in the United States Senate, and that is New York Senator and Democratic Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we often ask these days with so much tumult in the land, what is America? This is America. All the people here. This is our hope. This is our future. This is our dream. These people, they're what makes America a great country. And people like them who have come here decade after decade and century after century. They are our future. If we don't have people like these young people as American citizens, America will not have the future that it will be anywhere close to as bright as our past. We have always been a nation of immigrants from the very early days. We have always treasured immigrants from the very early days. And all of a sudden, we have a president who thinks he can gain political ground by attacking these beautiful kids and the so many millions of others like them who come from around the globe to live the American dream. We are hopeful that the court, the Supreme Court, will shine a light on us, will understand the right thing to do, will understand that a president who wants to violate the law and trample on the rights of people like the folks behind us is so wrong that in a nation where there's rule of law, he will be rebuffed, and they will be allowed to stay here and become citizens. That's what we hope. The president's relentless scapegoating of immigrants is the most un-American thing I could think of. My middle name is Ellis, named for Ellis Island. They didn't cross Ellis, come through Ellis Island, but it's the same thing. The southern border and Ellis Island is the same, a symbol of hope, of freedom, of a bright future. We, the Senate Democrats and the House Democrats, will not rest until the dreamers behind us and the millions like them, whether they be dreamers or others, become full-fledged, proud American citizens. Am I supposed to? You're the introducer?
Yeah, I am. All right. Before we hear from Speaker Pelosi, we're going to hear from a few of our dreamers, our DACA recipients. And the first person that we're going to hear from is Dalada Dorjian. Oh, sorry. Please.
Thank you for being here. Today has been a historic day for so many, and a day filled with so many emotions. But the primary emotion that I have been feeling over this strenuous fight for DACA has been that of confusion. I am confused. 86% of Americans support a right to residency for DACA recipients. 86% of Americans. In today's America, there are very few things that have an 86% approval rate. I don't even think ice cream has an 86% approval rate. Yet, despite an overwhelming amount of support for DACA recipients, like myself, who continue to contribute to America's academia and America's economy, the executive branch wants to take it away, the legislative branch has yet to sign a bill, and the judicial branch is now examining its legitimacy. So I am genuinely confused. DACA recipients contribute $1.4 billion in federal taxes alone every year, another $1.7 in state taxes. We generate $42 billion in GDP every year, while the cost of removing DACA recipients from this country alone would be $10 billion. These are young individuals who have a nearly spotless record in addition to being enrolled in school or have graduated. These are individuals who are completely integrated into America, as the average age that DACA recipients come to the United States is only 6 years old. Many DACA recipients did not even know that they were undocumented until they were teenagers. I was born in Canada and came to the United States when I was 5 years old. I went to school in America from K through 12. I spent another 4 years in America going to college, and now I am in my 3rd year of law school at the UCLA School of Law, learning the laws of the United States of America. Both of my parents are American citizens. My only sibling is an American citizen, and I am undocumented. And somehow, my government is arguing that I don't belong here. Well, my question then to my government is, where do I belong? Is it the country that I spent the first 5 years of my life? Is it the country that I haven't been to in over 20 years? Do you understand now why I am confused? You may be wondering why or how I am even undocumented. When my parents became permanent residents in 2009, they applied for my citizenship. At that time, I was 14 years old. While I was undocumented, I still had a pathway to citizenship through my parents that I was patiently waiting for. And in the meantime, I received DACA when I turned 18, which allowed me to work and get a driver's license and pay in-state tuition for college. My parents received their American citizenship less than 2 weeks after I turned 21, and that should have been a day filled with joy and celebration. But technically, when I turned 21, under the law, I was no longer considered my parents' child, and my application was terminated. We begged for the USCIS to make an exception, but our request fell on deaf ears. The only way I could renew my application was to go back to Canada, but then I would be barred from coming back to the US for 10 years. So DACA was my only option, and DACA remains my only option. And now my only option to stay in the only country that I know as home is in jeopardy. If DACA were to be rescinded, I would be left with over $100,000 in private student loan debt since I was not eligible for federal financial aid, and unable to use the skills that I paid tuition to acquire because I am only versed in American jurisprudence. I know nothing about Canadian law because I've never lived a year there that I could remember. I don't even know anyone in Canada. My entire life is here. There is virtually nothing different between me and an American citizen besides a piece of paper. Not only do I want to be here, but almost 90% of my country wants me to be here too. So I am confused. But that does not mean that I am not hopeful, nor does it mean that I have given up. So I'm here to ask everyone who is listening, to the Congress members, to the Supreme Court justices, to the President of the United States, let's find a solution to this problem. Let's be on the right side of history sooner than later. The time for common sense immigration reform is now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I wanted to invite up Esmeralda Tovar Mora.
I'm a little short, so bear with me just a second. For 21 years, I have been pledging allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. I came to this country when I was just 2 years old, so the United States is really the only country I've ever known. It's the place where I learned to speak a second language. The man that taught me how to speak English is not an American citizen. I work with my father for his catering and event business, as well as a certified medication aide at a senior living center where I am studying to become a nurse. I'm also studying for another bachelor degree in ethics. It is also America. America is where I have fallen in love with my best friend. It's where I've gotten married, and where I was blessed to give birth to my daughter, Rose. My husband, Michael, is a specialist in the Kansas Army National Guard, and last year, he was called to active duty service in the Middle East for 9 months overseas. While he served his country, I was at home, caring for our now 3-year-old daughter, going to school and working. Those 9 months when my husband was away were hard, as any single parent can appreciate, but to do so with the constant fear that I wouldn't be home when my husband got home was almost unbearable. Parents worry. It is something that is almost impossible to avoid when you love someone as much as a parent loves their child. But now imagine having to develop a deportation plan while your husband is literally thousands of miles away. That fear will swallow you up whole. My husband fought for everyone in this country, for your rights as a citizen, my rights as an immigrant, an asylum seeker's plea for help, a better tomorrow, and the freedom of this country. Yet his own country won't ensure that his own wife and mother of his child is protected from deportation. The decision that my parents made to bring me to this country is something that I will never be able to thank them enough for. As a mother, I know that I would have made the same choice. I can guarantee you that there is at least one person in your life, whether it's a spouse, a sibling, a friend, a coworker, or a neighbor, that is directly affected by the current immigration crisis. DACA gave me a future, a chance to advocate for my community, and a chance to work and go to school. Just imagine when my DACA expired and I was waiting for my renewal to come in. For 2.5 weeks, I had absolutely no status. I couldn't go to work, and I couldn't go to school, and I couldn't even renew my tags because you need a non-expired license for that. The Supreme Court will now decide whether I am allowed to remain in this country, whether I will be separated from my daughter and husband and sent to a country that I barely remember. I want the justices to hear my story. Sorry, I lost track. And I want every member of Congress to understand what the years of inaction has meant for my family and to call on them to finally fix our broken immigration system, not just for me, but for the millions of immigrants across the country with no opportunity to get in line and earn a pathway to citizenship. Because no matter the decision from this court or inaction in Congress, I know that I am right where I belong. My home is here. Thank you.
All right. And next we have Antonio Alarcon.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Antonio Larcon. I am a plaintiff in the Make the Road case and the Martin Batalla case. I came to the U.S. at the age of 10 with my parents. In 2012, due to the death of my grandparents, my parents decided to return to Mexico. But I decided to stay here to fight for their dreams and mine. 2 years ago, I graduated from Queens College in New York, making the first one in my family to graduate from college. DACA for me means the opportunity to work legally and ultimately live without the fear of deportation. For many of us here, this is the only home we know. We have friends, connections, family, and loved ones. Even though my family is in Mexico, I consider Jackson Heights in Queens, New York, my home. I went to school there. I have my friends there, and I plan to have kids in my community. Yeah, right. If the Supreme Court allows the Trump administration's plan to unlawfully end DACA and move forward, it means that we will lose our jobs, that my efforts to get an education and a college degree in a way will be in vain, because I won't be able to use it and contribute to my community. DACA has benefited almost 1 million people like me. It is a successful program and should be maintained. However, we know DACA is not the ultimate solution. Undocumented citizens of this country deserve more. Every single day, we contribute to the economy, to the culture, and into our communities. Therefore, we also need to be acknowledged as the citizens of this country. Today, I hope the court saw the human aspect of DACA, because beyond numbers and statistics, what is at stake is the lives of millions of undocumented people like myself. I hope they also remind themselves that this nation was built and must be continued to be a place that welcomes the contributions of immigrants. And just before I go, I also want to remind our elected officials that we're here, and you see all these beautiful faces and courageous faces, but it's because of our parents' sacrifices. It's not because we shouldn't be blaming our parents, because their decisions are the decisions that they make the best for ourselves. And we wouldn't be here standing with you all without the sacrifices of our parents. So our home is here.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you to all of our dreamers, those who spoke and those who were here present with us today. Thank you for your courage, for your bravery, and for your resilience, and you inspire all of us. And now it's my honor to introduce our final speaker, who is the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. And she is somebody who, when she was a speaker the first time, her first go-around, passed the DREAM Act out of the House of Representatives. And as speaker the second time, has now passed again a DREAM Act and TPS bill. And we await Mitch McConnell taking it up in the Senate. This is somebody who, in this legislative chamber, in this Congress, has been committed every day to make sure that the Dreamers and DACA recipients are protected. Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for bringing us all together so that we can say thank you to our dreamers for making America more American with their hopes, optimism, courage, determination to make the future better for their families. And for that, we are grateful to their parents. Please thank your parents for us as was mentioned by Antonio, for giving us the opportunity to have you in our country. I'm honored to be here with the distinguished chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, Mr. Castro, with the godmother of the DREAM Act, Congresswoman Lucille Robles-Aller, chairman now of the Homeland Security Committee, to be with our distinguished Attorney General of California, our former colleague and a champion on this issue in the Congress and now in the courts, Xavier Becerra. Whip Durbin, I don't know if he's still here, but he has dedicated a good deal of his official life on behalf of the Dreamers, because he knows that what's good for the Dreamers is good for America. Others have been here: Senator Menendez, Assistant Speaker Lujan, Senator Cortez Masto, Representative Sanchez, and I just want to acknowledge also Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia, Congresswoman Barragan, Congressman Carbajal, Congressman Correa, and Congressman Chuy Garcia, among others who have joined us now. Now here we are on this day that should be a very hopeful one for our country, where the Supreme Court of the United States will make a decision to either cause pain or find a solution by upholding what we think is the right thing to do. Just to put it in perspective, Ronald Reagan, this is not a partisan issue. President Reagan, when he was president, after the Congress passed the Comprehensive Immigration Bill of 1986, he said to Congress, "You didn't go far enough." And he instituted family fairness, which protected a higher percentage of people in our newcomers to our country than the President Obama's DACA order. A higher percent. If your Congress had acted, he said we should do more. He, President George Herbert Walker Bush, President Clinton, President George W. Bush, President Obama, all subscribed to that, except this president, which is so sad. And now this court has to decide as to whether President Obama was correct in following the lead of President Reagan in protecting newcomers in our country, or to support the illicit act of President Trump and what he did. We urge the court to support the lower court's decisions on this. We urge the court to do that. And as Justice Sotomayor talked about this morning, about how much pain would they cause in the lives of hundreds of thousands of people in our country. This is an important day. And we hope and pray that the courts will do the right thing, the all-American thing. However, at the same time, we are going over to the Senate. I invite my colleagues to join me as we go over to the Senate to bring to Leader McConnell H.R. 6, if I just may. H.R. 6 was passed over 160 days ago, the American Dream and Promise Act, which of course is a remedy for our dreamers and our temporary protected status newcomers, relatively newcomers to our country. This is a bill that has passed. It has overwhelming support, as has been mentioned. Delora mentioned that, and Esmeralda in her beautiful statement, and Antonio. They are a manifestation of the greatness of our dreamers, but also of the support that they have in our country and in the communities in which they live. So again, my colleagues, we are only members of Congress allowed to, with the senators, to march over with this. For some reason, the rules do not allow our dreamers to march with us, but I mean, people walk down the hall all the time, right? In any event, this is a time of great, we see everything as an opportunity. And this DREAM Act, as we saw on the Capitol, the steps of the Supreme Court this morning, hundreds of young people turning out and friends to support them. And one of the signs that I loved, all of them were wonderful, Home is Here being one of them, but one of the signs that say, you might say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Well, we want you to know that you're not the only ones being dreamers. We have dreams for you as well, and we fully intend to act upon them until, as Leader Schumer said earlier, we're not going away until the job is done. So thank you for your courage. Thank you for dreaming, because that is part of what America is. Thank you all very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, again. Thank you.
for being part of the press conference.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
This for you. We have another one.
You're from Houston. Oh, you're from Houston? I appreciate it.